Hey everybody, Mr. Richards here, and I'm on lesson number 20. This is a side-scroller video game, and it's like a really simple one. And for some of you, you might not have known this, but what you are trying to do is, if you go to part 1, you're trying to make almost exactly this side-scroller where you have a frog, a fly, and mushrooms. And if you kind of ignore the fly and the mushrooms, you'll notice that the frog is just staying in the same place. The only things that are moving are the mushrooms and the fly, okay? And the way it works, or what we want to do, is that every time the frog runs into the fly, the score goes up, and every time the frog runs into a mushroom, the health goes down, okay? So that's how this game works. You'll also notice the mushroom just keeps going across the screen. Once it goes off the screen to the left, it just reappears on the right side. The fly, once it either is eaten by the frog or it reaches the far side of the screen, it also goes across the screen again. But the location of it is either high or low or in the middle, and it seems to be sort of random. Okay, so we are trying to build this game. Okay, so when you go over to part 2, you'll notice that there's already a lot of stuff going on in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and run it, and you'll notice that we already have this health up here. It says health 100. Okay, and so if you look at this, I know it looks like a lot, and I'll change it to blocks because sometimes that's a little easier to see. All right, we have a lot of comments in here. All right, before the draw function, we have two variables that are created. We've got score and health. And then if we go down to the bottom, you'll see that the health is actually drawn on the screen. And the way we do that is we have text health that appears. That's this part right here. And then we are actually showing the variable health, which contains, right now the number 100. That appears after it, okay? So our job is to fill in the code that will do each thing that's listed in the comments. So right here, we put in code that draws a background. Down here, we would put in the code that changes the health when the sprite touches the mushroom, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go through these things, and then I'm going to go through a couple of extra things that you can do to make this even, cooler, I guess. All right, I'll also be switching between typing and block. I think the block is a little bit easier to see and understand what's going on, but it's much easier to type the code in, honestly. Now, sometimes I pull up the blocks over here so I know exactly how I have to type it. But the first thing that we have to do is we have to create 3 sprites. And I know it's 3 sprites because when I go to my animations, I see 3 animations. So we got frog, mushroom, and fly. So I'm going to make those 3 sprites. I guess I can make it blocks here. So I'm going to put in 1, 2, and 3. Here's our 3 sprites. We got frog. We're going to set that animation as frog. We got fly. Set that animation as fly. And we have mushroom. And we'll set that animation as mushroom. And now what I want to do here is every time I do something, I'm going to click run to make sure that I've got what I just did, it's working. And it is. I got the frog, the mushroom, and the fly is in between them. So great. Awesome. Okay, now before I do anything else, what I want to do is I want to move these things to be on the screen where I want them. So the frog, I want to be down near the bottom. So I'm going to put its X or its Y location at about 325 maybe. So X is fine at 200, but I'm going to put it at 325. Let's check. Yeah, that's a good place for it. I also want the mushroom to be at about 325, so I'm going to put its Y value at 325. So now it should be right with the frog, and it is. And the fly is honestly okay where it's located. Okay, so now we got the sprites created. Now we need to set the velocity for the obstacle and the target. Now the obstacle is the mushroom, and the target is the fly. Okay, so I'm going to do both of those, and I'm going to type this in here because it's a little bit easier. And I'm going to keep my velocities with the sprite. Okay, so the fly velocity, fly.velocity x is going to be equal to -5, and mushroom dot velocity x is going to be equal to -5. Remember, it's -5 because we need to go across the screen to the left. The y value, or the x value, is low on the left and high on the right, so the only way to get it to move to the left is to have a negative velocity. So now if we run this, those move off to the right. Awesome. Now, before we move on, we're going to draw a background in here. And I think light blue. Blue? Is that how you spell it? I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, good. Okay, so light blue background. Awesome. So there we go. Now you'll see that those objects move across the screen to the right. Awesome. So the next thing that we're going to do, okay, is I'm going to actually put the fly and the mushroom off the screen on the right-hand side by changing their x value to 450. That should put each one of them off the screen to start the game, which is where we want them. And then when we press go, they should move across the screen. So we'll start at 450 for both the mushroom and the fly. So there they go. Start on the right side, they move across to the left side. Awesome. So far, so great. All right. And I can show the blocks here. I've done all this work up here, and then I've just put the background in so we can kind of see what's going on. Okay. Now we can go in order here if we want to, but I would rather not. I would rather get these things moving the way we want first. Okay, so I'm going to head down to the looping section. In the looping section, what we're going to do is we're going to get both the fly and the mushroom. Once they go across the screen and disappear off the screen on the left, we're going to bring them back and put them off the screen on the right and send them across again. So it'll be a continuous loop, all right? And again, I'm going to do this with text because it's a little bit faster for me. All right, so we're going to start with the obstacles. So if mushroom.x is less than -50, so if it's gone off the screen on the right-hand side, then we're going to do mushroom.x equals 450. And that should result in the mushroom, once it gets off the screen to the left, reappearing on the right-hand side and repeating. And that's exactly what it's doing. So that's so far so good for the mushroom. Okay, now let's do the target, and this is the fly. So if fly.x is less than -50, then we are going to do fly.x equals 450. And now that fly should also do the same thing as the mushroom. It should just disappear at the left side, reappear on the right side. Well, there's one additional thing that we want to do to the fly, and that is to give it a random position on the screen in terms of how high or low it is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in one additional piece of code here. I'm going to do fly.y equals random number, and I'm going to go between 300, let's make it between 50 and 300. I'll make it between maybe 75 and 300. And so every time it goes off the screen, we're going to reset it back onto the right side. And we're also going to give it a random y value. So now when we run this, that mushroom is going to keep going back and coming, exactly the same place. But now the fly is going to be at different heights every time it goes across. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so we've done the basic stuff. Now let's get our frog jumping. Now there's 3 parts of the jump. We have to go up, so we have to set the velocity y to be a negative number. That will make it go up. You notice as I bring the mouse up, our y value is decreasing. Once we get to a certain height, we'll call it maybe 75. We want that velocity to be in a downward direction, so increasing. And then when we get to the bottom, we want it to stop. So we got 3 things: up, down, and stop. So those are going to be 3 if loops, all right? Now our frog is at a y value of 325. So we're going to make a little if statement that says if frog.y is greater than 325, we're going to do 2 things. First, frog.velocity y, we're going to make be 0, so that's going to stop it from moving. And I'm going to just do this isn't necessary, but I'm going to actually do a reset and place the frog at 325. So we'll do frog.y equals 325. And what that's going to do is if we get it, somehow the program skips or lags or whatever, and the y value becomes 324, instead of stopping at 324, it's going to stop at 324 and then be reset to 325. Okay, so that gets our frog to stop. Awesome. Now we want to make an if statement for the up arrow so that the frog moves up. So we're going to do, oh, and by the way, we can't really test this yet. So we'll do if frog, or if key down, and the key is going to be up. All right, so if we push down, if we press the up arrow, we're going to do frog.velocity y is going to be -5. Okay. And that should get our frog moving. So I'll click run, I'll click the up arrow, and it's not working. It's because I forgot to spell velocity, V-E-L-O-C-I-T-Y. There we go. Surprised it didn't give an arrow. Okay, there we go. We got the frog. The only problem is it doesn't really stop moving when it gets up to the top. So we're gonna do our last thing, which is if we get to the highest point that there will be a fly, which is a y value of 75, then we're gonna send the frog back down. So if frog dot y is less than 75, then we are going to send the frog back down. So frog dot velocity y equals +5. Okay, so now our jump should work. Go up, turn around, come down, and stop. Super. So we got the jumping done. Okay, now we just have to do the interactions with the target. So the first one is if the player touches the obstacle, the health goes down and the obstacle turns. Now for this, we're going to use the isTouching command. So we'll put in our if statement, if frog.isTouching. Remember, our obstacle is mushroom. Then we're going to do two things. We're going to make health equals health minus, make it maybe 0.5, and you'll see why in a second. And mushroom dot rotation equals 10. So that'll get it to turn sideways. So health goes down, obstacle turns. So let's run it. That health is going down and the obstacle turns. Now you'll notice that it happens every time that mushroom is in contact with your frog, the health goes down. So it doesn't just go down, once, it goes down many times, it counts down. So that's just something to be aware of. It's a little glitch in this game, or kind of the way it is, but that's fine. Okay, so now we've got what happens if we run into a fly. Well, we already wrote a lot of what we want to do when we run into a fly. We want that fly to be reset on the other side of the screen. So we're going to drag in this part. All right, this is our reset for our fly. Okay, I'm going to move it over to the right side of the screen again. So I just copied that, and I'm going to put it in here. If it's the same thing, frog.isTouching fly, and we are going to move that fly out of the screen. We're going to give it a random number in terms of the y value, and we're going to do score equals score plus 1. So now every time we run into a fly, the score should go up. But wait a minute, we don't have score on the screen, so we know what to do. Well, let's go down here where we have our health showing up, and let's put a score in. So text, we'll say score, colon, and let's put that at, let's see, our y value is 30, so let's put that at x value of 50 and a y value of 30. Let's see if that shows up. Yep, score shows up, that's great. Actually move that over just a little bit, maybe I'll put it at 25. Yeah, it's moved over, okay. And now we actually need to show the variable score, so I'll put in another text. And this time we'll just do the variable score, so no quotation marks. We'll put this at maybe 125 and 30 and see where it shows up on the screen here. Okay, that's a little bit too far. I'm gonna maybe put it at 100. See if we can get that 0 to move to the left a little bit. Yeah, there we go, that looks good. Okay, so score looks good. We see the health. Now let's see if that score works. See if I can catch one of these flies. Yep, and it does. Okay, every time I run into a fly, the fly disappears and the score goes up. Awesome, I'm good with this. Okay, now if we go to the show blocks, you'll notice that we've actually done everything we need to do for this game. We filled everything in. The only thing that we could do to make it exactly like the example is to put a little bit more of a background in, okay? Which, you know, you can do, that's fine. Just put more of this stuff up here in the background. But I'm gonna do two things that make this game a little bit more challenging and a little bit more fun. And what that is I'm going to give the speed that the mushroom and the fly move at, I'm gonna make that a random number, okay? So here's where the comments really help. So if we touch the fly, not only are we gonna increase the score and send it across the screen to be on the right side, but we're also gonna give it a velocity that is a random number. So we'll do fly.velocity, velocity, velocity x equals random number. And we're gonna put it in between -3, which is pretty slow, and maybe -12, which is pretty fast. And remember, we've got two situations where we reset the fly. The first is when the frog runs into the fly, and the second is when the fly goes off the screen. So here's a loop down here for the fly. So I'll just copy that one line of code in, which will also give the fly a random speed. I'm gonna do the same thing. Well, I guess I already copied it. And I'm gonna do the same thing for the mushroom. So check it out. I'll copy that in for the fly, and I'll just change it to mushroom velocity x. Now when I run this the very first time, you notice how many different speeds the fly moves at? And the mushroom too? Wow, this game gets a lot more challenging actually. Okay, well, there you go. So that's something that can make the game a lot more challenging, a lot more interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's about all you can do. Now, there's one other thing you could do, and that is, we could make 2 flies, all right? If you do make 2 flies, you have to pretty much copy every single line of code that you were gonna use, so instead of having 1 fly, we'd have 2. Then we'd have to do the fly is touching fly 1 and fly 2. So I can do that really quick, but I would say that's something you can probably figure out on your own. The only other thing that you might want to do is, see our background is really static, and one of the things that we can do to make this background appear like it's moving a little bit better is to actually give it a side-scrolling background. Now, instead of telling you how to do this, I'll just make this like the level 4. When we put a background, like a sprite background, so one of these animations in, if I was going to choose a background like this, maybe pick this background. All right, and I was gonna make that sprite and have that be the background, so I'll put that, and remember, if it's a background, we want it to be first in the list. So I'll do, and animation will be, now if I put that in there, the background, what the heck? Oh yeah, we got 2 backgrounds, let's get that on there. Okay, so we got our background now, but the background isn't moving, okay? And we're also not seeing that frog appear on top of the background, but let's just ignore that for, oh yeah, the frog is right there, we can see it. Okay, now if we want to make this background move, we're gonna also have to give the background the same velocity as the mushroom and the fly start out with, so we'll do background dot velocity x equals -5, and that'll get that background to move across the screen. Pretty cool. But as soon as we do that, we run into the problem, which is the background moves off the screen, and then we have this sort of weird stuff going on. And so what we actually have to do if we're going to use a background that is a sprite is we have to make 2 of them, okay? So I'm going to put a second one. I'm going to call it background 2. Okay? And I'm going to use the same animation. It can be the same animation, it's no big deal. All right. Okay, and we're starting that one at 200, 200, but we actually want to start that one completely off screen. We're going to set it 400x to the right. So I'll change it from 200 to 600. And now when I run this, it's not perfect, but you can see that that second screen now shows up. Now, the only thing we have to do is loop those so that they both reset when they move completely off the screen. So I'm going to put in loop background. 2 if statements is all you need. So if background, our first background, is less than -200, yeah. If our background is less than -200, we need to reset it to 600. Background x equals 600. I need to make this x. And we do the same thing for the other one. So we'll do if 2.x is less than -200, we will loop background 2.x equals 600. Now, this is not going to be perfect, but it should get those backgrounds to kind of keep scrolling. Okay, see that? It just gets reset and appears over and over again on our background. So it's not perfect, but you know, it looks a lot more like a side scroller than it did before. And then everything works the same way it did. So there you go. There's your slide scrolling video game for lesson 20. Good luck.